Welcome back to Trending in Education. Dan Stratford here, setting the scene for today's episode, and it focuses on music. Mike and Brandon kick off the conversation talking about how music is very much a part of the human condition, the human experience, and what use cases there are already on file, already studied about music and learning, but also what we can learn from anecdotal experiences around music and how we ourselves use it every day to learn, to study, and to grow. After that, you'll hear a conversation, or actually I should say a small snippet of a conversation with Ken Florence, a colleague of ours here at Kaplan Test Prep, who you'll hear more of in the future here. He is a composer, a musician, and a teacher, and somebody that Mike and I get to talk to here. You're going to hear a small snippet of that on today's episode. Then later in the week, you will hear an extra episode with Ken, Mike, and myself, and we'll be wholly focused on music. We also are very happy to start introducing new music to you here on the podcast, a new musical brand and identity for us. Hope you enjoy it. Let us know. Tweet at us at Trending in Ed. Facebook, the same. Go over to trendingineducation.com. Send us an email. Let us know what you like, what we can improve, and what you want to see more of. With that said, here come Mike and Brandon talking about music.
Mike Palmer and Brandon Jones here.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm Brandon. The Dan, who you almost called me, is not here.
No.
But I am. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Brandon. And today's show is going to be a little bit musical for you. So I'm going to try to be a little more musical with my voice right now. So we wanted to talk about music, and we wanted to talk about how music can help with learning, and how music is a really core part of what it is to be human, and a bunch of different topics that we're going to jump into. But Brandon, what's happening with you? Anything striking your fancy? Anything musical top of mind today?
Well, we're recording just to we talked about memory palaces in a previous episode, and to hang some visuals into your own.
Yes.
We record in a room which we call the Whisper Room. I mean, I can tell them about it, can't I?
Yes.
So it's a padded room, no joke. But we sit here with these, we've got these cans on, we've got these headphones on,
yes,
and these mics, and so I always feel like I've just recorded. I've booked time in the studio to just drop some lines,
yes,
drop some rhymes,
yes.
And every time we end up just talking about podcast stuff.
Right.
So I feel like I'm in a musical mode every time I'm in this seat, actually, to be honest with you.
Yes. And sound too, right? So music is just a type of sound, baby.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it's beyond the textual. It gets paralinguistic,
mm-hmm.
or it's not really the semantic content. It's another way in which we encode sound.
Yeah, and which we specifically, you said at the top that it's a human thing.
Yes.
I think it's interesting. It was fascinating to me in reading through this that when animals hear songs, so for example, I'm going to come back to finish this point. Every time I leave my apartment in the morning, I live in New York City,
yes.
I have Alexa. I have a dog named Charlie.
Sure.
I have Alexa play NPR for Charlie. Yeah, it's like some noise.
Sound,
right?
yeah.
Right. So they have segments where there's music that they'll play for a while. Right. NPR.
Yeah.
And does that mean that Charlie's just hearing noise? He's he can't discern the difference between the music and the non-musical word parts. It's just noise. Some animals, or all animals?
Not all animals. So there's a really good Vox Explained about this that kind of got us moving on this, and we may wind up talking more to the producer that because it was a really interesting cross section of information about music and what you can learn about music. But in terms of the comparative biology of it, looking at other animals, many different animals share some of our music capabilities and our music comprehension, but none of them have all of it. So some understand rhythm, but they don't understand melody, and some understand harmony, but they don't really know how to sort of synthesize sort of the emotional
For some, it's all about the bass. No treble.
No treble.
Yeah.
Yes. But there was even, again, to paint the picture, there is there's a cockatoo. There's like a talking bird of some kind who knows how to get down to the. I'm moving my head. As though I also know.
Listeners, you're missing it.
I can dance like a cockatoo, so to say. But anyway, like I forget the name of the bird, but the bird can get down in a way that is rhythmic, and other animals can't. And then birds, generally speaking, are almost more fluent with melody, almost in an unconscious way. So like the songbird and like sort of the idea that the songbirds with the best musical pipes, they impress the other songbirds, and it helps them make more songbirds.
Sure.
So, but that's more almost it's not like the songbird with beautiful plumage is adorning that plumage and knows how to be a wonderful costume designer. They just make it happen.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. So it is really interesting as you start looking, like we have talked about sort of the evolutionary and biological underpinnings of some of our learning and some of our cognitive capabilities. It was really interesting, and I think this explainer did a nice job of it, to talk about how no one really brings it all together the way the human mind can. And didn't get as much into the evolution of it, but I think that's also fascinating. Like, at what point did humans start to leverage music, and why was it a competitive advantage, is a really interesting question. I know there's been other research. I remember Dan Pink's book, When, talked about this, about how there's a really genuine psychological benefit and a health benefit. They found ties to longer life to people who sing in groups, and that perhaps there was some you also think about it if, when you're marching in formation, people are singing together, or when you're trying to get a group of people sort of moving in the same direction, being in sync to either music, from a PA system or from a DJ, like me when I'm at the club, or
the club.
Yeah. Or like, maybe our ancestors, was it that maybe a tribe that knew how to sing together and synchronize together, and those kinds of practices had an advantage over another one. I think that stuff's really, really fascinating. And, some of it gets touched on here. I think we also wanted to talk about some of the other ways in which music helps, right?
And helps with learning.
Yeah. So I think the Gabby Giffords story in particular resonated with me. And Gabby Giffords, U.S. Senator, or was she a Congresswoman?
Congresswoman, yeah.
Congresswoman in Arizona who was, tragically shot. Shot in the head, and survived, and then went through a pretty arduous, rehab process, but was having trouble recovering her ability to speak. And we've talked about the connections to the brain and the speech areas in the brain. They were clearly damaged by the bullet that went through her brain. Not too different from Phineas Gage.
That's right.
Which, if those of you who love our back catalog, pretty good story about.
Such a good story.
Phineas Gage, the 19th century railroad worker who
all the livelong day took a railroad spike through the brain. Through the brain.
Yeah. And then so Gabby Giffords, similar problem, although not a spike. Sadly it was a gunshot. But she's doing pretty well now. And then there's an interesting article that we'll share out about how, when she was trying to recover her speech and her ability to talk, music was extremely helpful. And I know, Brandon, as a parent, especially in the early days of a kid's life, once they're starting to speak and they're starting to learn, music is a really powerful tool.
For sure.
Yeah. And any thoughts on the rehab applications, or how they relate to sort of the learning at first blush when you're young?
Yeah, I probably have thoughts on both. I'll start with the rehab. So I worked at a VA hospital for a while, doing community service and as a recreational therapist. And so I was in the sort of general therapy group, and there was therapy through music therapist as well there. And I mean, I hope I was helpful too. Like I was playing games with people, you know, in some cases to help regain muscle strength. In some cases, you know, to have the sense of sort of teamwork and to provide the humanity of the experience. But I definitely, like, I saw lots of patients there who were like, that was the thing that they looked forward to. So this is anecdotal and, you know, many years ago remembered, but I think to the point that you cited around research that shows that there's longer life expectancy from people who sing in groups. I think some of that sort of congregational, you know, group singing is very human and very nourishing and can be so in a way for people who are recovering as well.
Right,
and,
right.
you know, there's like, there's the probably harder science of how repetition in the brain works with neuroplasticity and some of the things we talked about in a previous episode.
Sure.
And I think, you know, for Gabby Giffords, like that's probably what's happening here. But I think there's a broader social aspect as well. And then as a parent, I mean, it's all sorts of songs with your kid. I think "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" is one of the ones that was cited in this Gabby Giffords article too. You realize, among other things, that there's only like one song with just different lyrics. So it's "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star."
Yeah.
"Ba Ba Black Sheep," same song. Like there's only like a couple of different note progressions that you can do in life.
Yeah.
But I mean, my daughter likes to sing all the time. I wrote a song for her, which I'll spare the listeners from repetition here. But
maybe as an extra.
Maybe as an extra. I play on a toy, what Penny calls, my daughter calls a tar, because she can't say guitar for some reason.
Get out of here. It's just a tar.
It's just a tar. Play it on your tar, Daddy. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it feels in some, from that like little meandering through my own lived experience, it's very human. It starts basically immediately or sort of, you know, there's a prenatal part to it too. And is I think something that draws people together. So that's my man on the street reporting.
I liked
for
it.
You.
You humanized what was otherwise somewhat abstract to us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, and it is interesting now as like brain research continues to improve, understanding how brain waves are impacted by sound and impacted by, you know, the type of music that you're listening to. And increasingly, performance research is finding that depending on the type of task, different types of music either aid performance or impair it. And you can even see this in, you know, many of your the pregame rituals we see amongst our athletes. They're kind of locked into their own head, and then having your own music and your own headphones kind of locking that into you allow you to sort of almost get into a meditative state where you're, you know, it's your walk-up music. It's your thing that gives you that sense of, it's my time. And I do think that is something that perhaps we under leverage, you know, like it is interesting, you know, to think about how music can inspire and motivate and also calm, you know, and I do feel like we need a score for this show too. Like when we're being inspirational, we should get the inspirational music.
Yeah, some swelling,
underneath.
like music swelling in the background.
Yeah. And then when we reach the big climax, and then maybe there's a big cymbal, you know, and a trumpet flare of some kind.
I like it.
And then and then we're in the denouement. The unraveling at the end. But what else struck you as far as some of the articles that we were kicking around here?
Well, there was the one on playing music for babies, like Mozart in the womb, or Mozart as your baby is sleeping, playing Mozart in the background. We talked about myths here on the pod. I think that has been disproven to.
Was it debunked?
I think it was debunked. Yeah. It was debunked. But this is the thing. I feel like if you said to people, does playing Mozart for your baby make her smarter?
Right.
A non-insignificant number of people would say confidently yes.
Yes.
And in fact, like there's a whole cottage industry around like Mozart for babies.
Right.
And it seems from these articles, and we can share them, like that's not the case.
Right. In fact, it would be more useful as someone who's starting to get more acquainted with, the prenatal action. But like it's more useful at times to have the mother listening to Mozart, because she'll then relax, and then if she relaxes, the baby doesn't get the stress hormones. So like it is interesting that there's a little bit of truth even in the myth, in that like, depending on where the baby headphones on the belly are, maybe mom heard a little bit of it, and if she heard a little bit, if she relaxed, it's good. So like.
But that's right. That is interesting. But it's through the mom, like the mom's physiology.
Correct.
And not that, baby in the womb is hearing Mozart and so inspired to like become, her own little composer.
Until the baby headphones get created, that's going to be the standing understanding. Yeah. If there were ways for babies to get access to that, it is an interesting topic for sure. And then at what point does music actually aid in learning? And like, it is more cognitive load to listen to music, but sometimes if it is more like background music or like, sort of something sort of supportive in the background, can that actually enhance your understanding, particularly as we listen to content more? And then also if you're reading with your eyes, if you're old school about your reading, and there's like classical music in the background, or whatever sort of ambient music that's sort of pleasing or calming to you, do you actually retain your knowledge better, or is it distracting? These are really interesting areas of research. We're kind of scratching the surface of it now, but we'd love to dig in deeper. And I think we're going to try to build on that in this conversation, and then also figure out, are there other experts that we could talk to help us further expand?
Yeah, I think we have some in our sort of extended network here. So I would expect to hear from a guest or two on this topic. Music, as you said, it's very human, and so I expect this is a topic we can come back to, and with some friends as well.
Absolutely.
Up next on our music episode, we hear from our colleague Ken Florence. Ken is a musician himself, a composer, a music teacher, and an employee here at Kaplan who we've gotten to work with over the past couple of months, and I am very excited for what he, brings to the podcast from a production standpoint, but in this interview, his musical knowledge is a great listen and something to dive into. You're going to hear a segment of it here, and then later in the week, you'll hear the full extra, hopefully with a few more segments, as well as we continue to produce more content around music and learning, music and education. Look for so much more. So here's Ken Florence, myself, and Mike Palmer discussing some tidbits about his life. Do you find that music has helped you learn other things, like learning the music the way you have and the way you can dissect and understand it? Has it helped you in other ways, or maybe even has it hindered the way you learn how to change car oil, or how maybe I know you live in New York City, so that's not really the best example, but has it helped you in other ways to be more methodical in the way you learn things?
Sure. I mean, I think what it really does is it helps you get into flow states, If you have a regular practice of sort of achieving a certain kind of flow,
sure.
And then you can apply that to other areas of your life.
And just to clarify, you mean flow based on the research of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi?
Yes, exactly that.
I'm just very proud that I can pronounce his last name. I had to spend time learning how to pronounce Csikszentmihalyi.
I'm not going to attempt it.
Yeah, it's
but
easy.
That sounds right.
It's like Csikszentmihalyi. It's actually not that hard, surprisingly. But it is surprisingly hard to get into a flow state, and then
music can help you get there
for sure. Although your point earlier, I think, was interesting as well, in that since you're so tuned into music, it can almost start to inhibit the flow state. In that, if you're trying to focus on anything else, it's almost occupying too much of your attention, to allow you to have the cognitive focus on the thing that you want to be focused on?
Well, it can inhibit information processing,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't inhibit other activities which could benefit from a flow state themselves.
Yep.
So like if I were changing the oil
Right.
of my car,
Right.
like that's kind of a mechanical process that I don't have to really use much brain power to do.
Sure.
And so I think having music on can sort of lend to the sort of rhythmic
Yep.
aspect of performing the task.
Mm-hmm.
And can definitely get you in a flow state that kind of where what you're doing kind of resonates with the music.
Yeah. And then the idea of a flow state, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's kind of a cognitive modality that that involves a release of deliberate action.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could define it as the opposite of that.
Right.
It's deliberate action without effort.
Right.
So you're kind of you let go of your direct control over what's going on and kind of just allow the thing to perform itself.
Right.
Almost as like a detached observer
For sure.
to the scene.
And it's frequently, like, I've heard this described by musicians in a bunch of different ways. Recently I saw JayZ interviewed by David Letterman, like that Netflix thing was going out there. And JayZ was talking about it more around flow, or like around lyrics. But he was saying there's those times when I'm, quote, in the pocket, is what he said, which I think that language he might have even picked up on that from like Coltrane and like jazz musicians. But the idea that like, and it's also like, I've heard it also talked about as a group, like when a group is in swing, or like when a group is like synchronized enough, like a band, it definitely works that way too, where like the individual gets into a flow state as an individual performer, but then also a group of musicians or a group of teammates can kind of get into a collective rhythm where they're just sort of performing optimally. Dan, you look like
it's the San Antonio Spurs in basketball, like 3 or 4 years ago. The idea that they just all knew where the other was going to be, and the plays just sort of ran themselves rather than needing real human influence. That's I hadn't thought of it from a learning perspective, like from that sort of higher level idea behind it. But that's really intriguing to think of. I equate it to athletics a lot of times from where I'm from personally, but it's intriguing to think of it as an actual learning way of getting into the flow of the learning, and learn that way.
I think it's a performative thing is the way I think of it. So like it's sports, it's music, it's taking tests.
I mean, a lot of the music of indigenous cultures around the world is kind of centered around this collective act of music making.
Yep.
Which doesn't really like feature solo artists or like, refined articulation of very specific musical patterns,
right,
but more so the sort of like emergence of a collective flow.
Sure. It's like I was going to say like a flash mob, but it's actually the opposite of a flash mob. If a flash mob was actually spontaneous and people would just, start making music, in Grand Central at random, just because it emerges from the culture in like a way that's natural. It's like a drum circle, I guess, is the way I would think about it, where like that's more, I guess, what you're describing, where like there's even one in Brooklyn in Prospect Park, but like,
I've seen that one.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like somebody starts, frequently like there's not even anybody doing anything. There might be just a couple people standing around, and somebody starts, playing one drum, somebody starts dancing, and then before you know it, by like 6 o'clock on a Sunday night in Prospect Park in the summer, there's a whole party going on, and nobody was like, okay, can you please start hitting this drum in this particular way, and then Dan, can you start getting down in the way that only you can?
It's a very fair description.
Yeah, well, it's yeah, exactly, but that's fascinating. Yeah, and it is also like music does perform that function, I guess, in the other way too, right? Like, so that when music is played to a group, it does get the group synchronized in a way that they wouldn't be otherwise. So like in terms of group performance, I'd be curious, maybe we could look for more research around that, but like, does a group perform better? What types of tasks do groups perform better when there is shared music? And then at what point, Dan mentioned Muzak, whether intentionally or not at the top of this segment, but like at what point can the music actually like almost create a different vibe within a group? And that's something we're also curious about, I think, on the show too. So one of the things we hope our listeners will start to notice is maybe more of Ken's influence, more your influence as we get more sound from you, because that's one of the things we're really looking to do. Like, can that change the mood? Can it get everybody, can it trigger different thinking or different aspects of your cognition?
Really looking forward to being a part of that.
A great discussion between Mike and Brandon and a fun start to the talk with Ken Florence, a Kaplan Test Prep colleague, a music teacher, composer, and a musician himself. So more to come from Ken later this week, not only in segment form and episode form, as we'll release an extra of the full version of that conversation, but Ken will also be lending his talents to adding more music, as I said earlier, to this podcast as we move forward. So please stay tuned for that. As always, find us on Twitter at TrendingInEd, same on Facebook. Find us at trendingineducation.com, and find us every Tuesday on your podcasting app, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn. Remember, subscribe, like, comment, and share. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Trending in Education.